right, it is 9:04, so why don't we get started? So I think Weezik is going to join us a little bit later. So our main segment today, we have Jonto on the line to talk about the Stability Vault. So usually we kick these things off with kind of a review of what's going on with options, but since Weezik is not here yet, why don't we punt that till he gets on and just dive right into the Stability Vault. I think everyone's been keeping track of what's going on with DIGG and options on dig.finance and the Twitter bot. We've got a stream of 14 or 15 positive or equilibrium rebases. So we're cooking with gas on that. Congrats to everyone who's been tweeting, helping us get the word out and keeping this rolling. But the main issue with Stability Vault is something it's been in development. There's been a lot of dev time put into it over the past months, and it's just kind of been waiting for a time when the market conditions are right, when DIGG undergoes an expansion, and then that will be a better time to launch it. So that means it's a good time now that we've had this string of positive rebases to kind of dig into that and figure out exactly how it works, what needs to happen for it to get launched, and what the future looks like with a Stability Vault in place for DIGG. So Jonto's been heading up a lot of the kind of econ work and working with the developers to get that built and ready to go. So Jonto, do you want to give us kind of a quick rundown of where things are with the Stability Vault and what it'll look like for that to be launched?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I think the Stability Vault, it's good to think about it in kind of historical context with DIGG. So when DIGG launched, there wasn't really much of a stability mechanism, which is kind of, we got it launched and put it out into the wild. So, there were incentives for LP and standard stuff like that. But the idea was always to use, instead of trying to layer on more assumptions or strategies for this, the asset retaining some sort of stability, using market forces and kind of doing what Badger did at that point already, which is vaults and strategies. So around the time of launch, there wasn't really, even when DIGG was initially conceived, it was like, all right, there'll be stability vaults in some manner, but there was no idea of what those really were. So we had a lot of internal ideas go back and forth, and then we ended up partnering with Stabilize, a project that kind of focuses on different interesting vault structures to build out the stability vault. So I had a lot of back and forth with them, and ended up on a strategy where, this is just kind of like the general structure of how it works. It's more focused on kind of bringing DIGG back to equilibrium, and kind of going with the market. So when the vault holds both DIGG and WBTC, and then when there's a positive rebase, but then the ratio is actually decreasing, the DIGG BTC ratio is actually decreasing day over day, then it will sell some of the DIGG from the DIGG side of the vault for the WBTC. And then on the flip side, when there's a negative rebase but price is increasing, it will use that WBTC to buy DIGG and then put it in the DIGG side. So, and there's a couple different that are in there for the you know impact for how much DIGG and how much WBTC relative to what's in the vault it actually uses. But it's very much a kind of like use kind of go with the market to push it back towards equilibrium. So it was built. I feel like it has to almost been like March or April or something at this point. So it wasn't ready when we did the Diamond Hands game, which is kind of like the last time when we were able to get the get some positive rebases. And then the goal was, once we kind of figured out the rebase options, the first iteration, the goal is to have the stability vault ready for that. And we ended up having it ready pretty much, like, I think it was a week after the rebase options round one started. And we were hoping that leading into that, we would have a couple weeks of positive rebases, and we'd be able to have the stability vault up and running, and then it would clock away some WBTC so that it can actually start, being supportive in negative rebase territory. That's the whole thing. It's a long term focused, um, part of this whole mechanism. I think the rebase mining is great, but it's very much focused on the next month, right? It's not okay. How do we do rebase mining for a year? Maybe we figure that out, but it's kind of month to month bootstrapping right now. Where the stability vault's very much ideally a long term core kind of component. And to talk about through, I guess technically where it's at and the idea behind it. So we initially launched it with just some treasury funds, with the idea that this is a very new vault structure. None of the other vaults that we have hold two assets or do trades like this. So we were hoping that we would launch it treasury assets, see it do a trade or two, and then we would open it up for open deposits for anyone. And it would be, you deposit big, is how it kind of generally works. And then ideally, we would actually migrate it to be the strategy behind BDIG. So BDIG would be the stability vault in the future. Because right now, BDIG does nothing. You just receive the emissions, but it's not functional. There's no strategy behind it. So that was kind of the step and the flow. But the problem is we didn't have any positive rebases going on. Now that we have positive rebases, I think we've had a couple situations where it would have taken action, meaning that it's positive rebases while the ratio is decreasing day over day. Turns out we didn't actually kind of trigger the vault initially to be live and being active. Then I know there's been some discussions about, okay, well, do we want to even do that now? Because once we kind of turn it on, we can't really turn it off. I guess we can, but to do that now while we're in positive rebase territory, because it will actually be selling DIGG, and that's where I guess we get into the discussion. My opinion is that we should prioritize first, doing that trigger so that we can get it doing some trades and feel good about it and see how it actually operates in the wild. And then start opening it up for public deposits, after we feel good about it. Because we have, I guess, a couple weeks of this next of this rebase mining session, and then so I guess there'll be discussion about the next one and how that looks. But it's very much, in my opinion, it's very much worth it to kind of trigger this and see how it works and make sure we kind of everyone understands it and see it function. And it's not a huge amount of money in it right now, so I don't think it would have a massive effect on the market. But if we can get it kind of tested in the wild, then we can feel better about, all right, let's start opening it up for public deposit, figure out the migration strategy if we're going to migrate it to be the BDIG strategy, things like that. So yeah, that's the overall history and background, I guess, of what it's working. But I don't know, Sal, is there anything else you want me to hit on or
Yeah. Yeah,
let me
I
know?
just
Or,
have kind of like I kind of have like a fundamental question about the stability vault. So I
Mhm.
was listening to a podcast with Evan, who is the founder of Ampleforth, and he kind of made this point that the rebase mechanism of Ample, which is the same as DIGG, what
Academic.
DIGG was based off, is the idea is that it's this kind of like pure economic. It's trying to find out how much dig or ample the market demands, right? And so like if it's overpegged, that means the market is demanding more of the asset, so it creates more of that, and it tries to kind of match the supply to what the market needs. So like imagine if dig is around in 20 years and Bitcoin is more scarce and the market, really is demanding this kind of synthetic Bitcoin, that could cause, a string of positive rebases and have it grow much bigger, and dig is a much bigger market cap than it is now. And does the stability vault, it seems like it kind of seeks to freeze the size of dig at a certain amount or kind of push it to a certain market cap, which means, if it's around the peg, then it's going to kind of be frozen in terms of its market cap. So I think the stability vault kind of has opinion expresses an opinion about the correct market cap size for DIGG, and how do we feel about that? Like, does that jive with the
Well,
overall mission of DIGG?
well, I would. I don't think that's accurate necessarily because when the price is increasing, when the ratio is increasing, and it's a positive rebase day over day, like the ratio increases day over day, and it's a positive rebase, the stability vault does nothing. So while it's going on like a run up, while it's running past Bitcoin, um, it won't do anything. But once it starts kind of pulling back, then it'll kind of nudge it back towards equilibrium. And same thing the other way.
Could you tell us what the exact strategy, like what is the algorithm of the stability vault in terms of the trade that it makes? Because I'm not sure that that anyone has like an exact, or many people have an exact understanding of how it works. What are the kind of what's the mechanism that it's executing?
Yeah, so it runs the same time as rebases. Um, and if it's a positive rebase, the stability vault will be receiving some amount of dig, right? Um, if the ratio is decreasing day over day. So this would be like, okay, so let's say Bitcoin was 40,000 today and it's 40,000, or 40,000 yesterday and it's 40,000 today at rebase time. So Bitcoin stayed stagnant, but dig went from 60 to 55. That would be still positive rebase, but the dig ratio is dig BTC ratio is decreasing day over day. That would trigger a selling of dig within the stability vault. And how much it sells is driven by a couple different parameters. There's like some minimums and a ratio, and that I don't have off the top of my head, but it's some ratio of the amount of dig that's actually in the pool and how much how much more was received through the positive rebase for that day in the pool specifically. So there is a sheet, and I don't know if maybe that's been shared around, but maybe that would probably be helpful with it kind of modeled out, and we could actually dump in the past couple months. I don't think I've actually updated the data with newer price information for so you can see how it would actually what it would have done over the past couple months. Does that
Got
make
it.
sense?
And do you,
Yep.
I think so. So it's not trying to constrain the market cap; it's trying to give us a smoother ride along the way, and it can still grow over time.
Yeah, and the whole point is it's supposed to track Bitcoin's price, right? But it's gonna market cap's gonna have its kind of growth and contraction cycles, and what this does is kind of okay, maybe this growth or contraction cycle's over, push it back towards my thoughts always been if we want dig to be something that's brings added benefit versus Bitcoin, it can always be structured or reprogrammed to kind of have a um, implied growth into it, right? So you can always have it rebased to be a little more than Bitcoin, um, to have some built-in like 5% annualized growth if we get to a point where we have mechanisms in place that are pushing it towards Bitcoin's price. I think you can still add that utility through tweaking other things.
Gotcha. Do you have an opinion? So how much is actually in the vault now, and do you have a view on how much is needed for it to be maximally effective?
Um, let's see. What do we? I honestly am not sure because we funded it back in March with some dig, and then I think we put in a couple of Bitcoin. So it's probably 100 to $200,000 worth, I would say. So it might not even be much dig even in there right now. Um, so I don't, and as far as the question of what is needed for it to actually be functional, I think it's always going to be relative to the overall market cap and liquidity available for dig. So, I think it needs to be of reasonable size. Like I said, there are parameters involved in it, so we can tweak the impact it has per trade. Um, once we kind of see how it performs. So the impact it has per action is, a function of Dig's liquidity, the amount in the vault, um, and then the parameters that are set.
Can I make a proposal? It sounds like we should have had some assets in there, and probably I think there have been days, I think there have been conditions in which we would have bought and sold since March, right? So maybe it makes sense to like point Dune at it or do some like analytics about actually what's happening and find good ways to like see what all these parameters are, understand what the effect is, and then actually come up with some like decent modeling and start talking about the details of what this thing does. And then kind of we can decide like what to do with it. But right now it seems like we already have a little bit of information, but we don't really know what it means or haven't really taken the time to analyze it. Maybe that's the next step.
Well, there have been situations in the market where we would have sold Dig at this point, but I think it was the thing where like the harvest hadn't been triggered, so it actually hasn't been doing anything. So that's all I'm advocating for doing soon is trying to get that pushed through. And I know we just have this huge queue of like multi-sig transactions we got to get pushed.
Okay. So right now it's still not doing anything. So it seems to me like, yeah, the first step is to get it doing something, right?
Yep.
And then to write something up where it's clear what all the parameters are, right? And then where we can start to do some like modeling, start to look at data, maybe get some Dune dashboards pointed at it so that we can like think about this from like from a detail perspective and then decide what to do next.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And this is all done a while back, and the Dig community is, many factors of in magnitude larger than it was back then. So this doesn't have to be the big thing, right? Like this is all open for discussion, but it's something that's been built, and the stabilized team did it, and we have like a fee share kind of set up with them, and they're great putting it together. But I want it to be something that everyone understands, and not just be like, all right, well, the team's kind of pushing this, and I guess we have to do it. I'm actually found the sheet and making a public version, and then sharing it out. I'll drop it in the chat real quick, the Dig Dojo discussion chat.
I was just gonna say I second what Jim said, and I think this all kind of aligns nicely. I mean, put differently, what you're saying, Jonto, is it's been built, the development's been built. Turning this on and kind of letting it harvest is almost like running UAT. Then we need to kind of do some financial modeling to kind of just like make sure everyone's understands what it is and how it works and like what the impacts is. And then we like execute on it, right? We move it to production. So I think if that is that kind of what you're saying, Trudy? I mean, at least that's the way I take it, because I think we want to make sure that everyone. I'm in support of this, but I think with anything we want to make sure it's working the right way, and then everybody has full kind of understanding of it, and then go from there.
Yeah, I do, and I'm just not 100% sure on where we're at with actually running the rebases, right? I know we're working on bots, but like we're also trying to work on getting harvest stable, and there's still some stuff with boost. So like that team's working on a lot of different stuff right now.
Yeah, no, not trying to put it in the order of priorities.
Right now,
things just kind of talking in an absolute way.
Yeah, no, I agree. In my mind, unless there's any urgent need to do this, right, or unless we think that this is going to be something that really moves the ball on Dig, right, then the thing to do is kind of wait until that makes it through the backlog, right, and then once like it's been there for a few weeks and we've got some data, then it seems like a more robust conversation we can have.
True. Yeah. I'm not sure if anybody else can hear, but I can.
I can hear him.
Anyway,
my take on it is that so firstly, coming on the call today, I think we were discussing about how the team is prioritizing these things, and we heard that like, okay, the Dig community was kind of like, hey, maybe we should hold off because we don't want this to like start harshing our vibe with all these positive rebases we're having. I think if we can get buy-in from the crew here to say, hey, yes, let's the Dig community is down for turning it on and seeing how it performs, then the team, the core team, we can we can make our own determination about where it goes in the queue. My my take is, I'll advocate for as top as possible, because these positive rebases are great, but they can stop happening as quickly as they started happening. And it's hard to say like, oh, well, if we get it through the queue in 2 weeks, like, well, this, rebase mining situation could be over, and we could have, distributed, 75% of the pool, and we might not have that much for the pool for the next one. And who knows if there's going to be more positive rebases next time, and we may not actually get to test the thing out. Because the biggest thing to me is having it start clocking away some Bitcoin so that it can have it for, I think everyone's fine shaving off a little bit of the positive rebases if it means that negative rebase time is not as bad. So yeah, that's my only take on it, is if we have the community buy-in. Obviously we have a lot of stuff in the queue, but I would push for
Well,
striking
so
one out.
from a community buy-in point of view, like, do you know how much Bitcoin and DIGG is in there now? Because I think the answer is not enough for it to matter, right? And so if the
Yep.
question from the community is, hey, do you mind if we turn this thing on with like 2 DIGG and 2 Bitcoin? That's a different question than, like 200 bit DIGG. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we're in agreement. Like, yeah, it's not a very large amount of DIGG, and I'll confirm that with folks. And then I think the big question is going to be, all right, let's let that run and see it work. And then it's, all right, let's discuss the opening for public deposit and possible transition with, the BDIG strategy. And that's a larger thing we have to have back with the community again.
Can we talk more about the public deposit aspect of it? So is this like it would be incentivized somehow, or there's a way to, if you're getting an APY if you're depositing onto this, or how does that work from the point of view of like a user depositing?
Yeah, well, it's the same as any vault. We'd have to determine where it falls in the emissions structure. So I think the question would be, if we're deciding it's ultimately what we're going to use for BDIG, one option is we just rip the Band-Aid and say, hey, BDIG is now using this strategy. All the DIG that was currently in there is now eligible. Whatever Bitcoin was maybe in there from the treasuries, stays in there. And it's, it'll be heavy DIG for a while, but that's fine. We can also have them run in parallel, and then we just make a decision. All right, do we direct some of the DIG rewards that's going to BDIG now towards that vault instead, or as well, depending on how much we have left to even emit. So it can be it can be incentivized just like any other vault. We can have deposit caps just like any other vault. We can ease into it as slowly as we want. It's more just timing things for when we want there to be a larger slug of assets in there. And, is the community bought in on this being kind of like, a big long-term component of DIG stability?
Here's
Do we
my.
have, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I think this is a conversation I think will extend for not just weeks but months. And my suggestion at this moment is, first off, Jonto, thanks for coming on and talking about this. I think this has been something everyone's been anxious to hear more about. Would it make sense to just, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, Trinian, but the RFF channels, and then that could be a place where we could start this, Jonto, and like we could talk about if there's any documents or starting points. I'm in support of the harvest and getting things tested now. I don't want to speak to the dev side, Tritium, but I'm in support of that, because if that's something we can start kind of working towards and making sure it's accurate, and then we can use that channel though to start talking about what, okay, step 2, 3, 4, 5 look like. I mean, I think this is probably going to be a discussion that is ongoing for maybe a month or two. I just don't know if we're going to solve it right now.
Yeah.
Other than just kind of thinking like, I think in my mind, I feel like we know what the next steps are, and maybe having a more formal place to discuss this on an ongoing basis will allow the community to talk more. And if it turns out that we want to go to more of a vote, then great. If not, I don't know what the right steps are, but at least that'll be a kind of more formal way to get the community kind of discussing it.
Cool. Yeah, I think the call today, I'm fine with lighting up an RFF channel for it. And I guess thing on the list we can discuss if we want to have any sort of like cap on RFF channels that'll force us to remove ones if we want to add more. But we can light it up on Stability Vault because I think it's something that, yeah, we can talk through it. You can see the sheet, but it's not the most straightforward thing. It's, all kind of new stuff. So we got to kind of, it takes a while for people to kind of process it. But if we can just get like soft thumbs up approval, I can share in that channel and this, I guess, what the current balances are in the vault and say, hey, we're all cool turning it on. As soon as we can get that action through the queue, then I think that's a cool place to start. And then we can start accumulating the data and sharing it and having people kind of build out whatever's necessary to track it and have that discussion in that channel.
Yeah. And I guess the thing that I need to know is just how to prioritize it, right? So for example, when when the BIP went through for the TCL, we dropped what we were doing and we got it in, right? This is on a list of a bunch of things to do. If the situation is hey, we need a lot more time to think about it and we're not sure, right? Then that is maybe different prioritization than this is going to make or break DIGG and we need to do it now. So I guess that's the only thing. And what I'm hearing is that it's kind of fine where it is. We know it's on the list. We're going to get to it once we deal with kind of some pressing issues. But if that changes, just let us know. And then we can talk about what we could push back in order to try to get it done sooner.
Yeah. My take on it is it's more based on this, rebase mining initiative, which I believe is ending end of this month. And if we want to give ourselves a week to possibly see the vault do something, getting it triggered this week would be a high priority in my opinion, just because if we don't, and then it's not until, maybe the next rebase mining event isn't as successful, then we're kind of all right, well, now we have to wait another couple months until we can get another mechanism in place for positive rebases to then see how it goes.
And can I just ask kind of like a bigger picture question? And this is just where my brain is going with this. So in the short term, there may be some I don't know, on the text channel vibe harsing or whatever. If it's stabilizing DIGG, it's not gonna have as this reflexive radical upside that's happening now. But in the long term, a more stabilized DIGG is something that's going to be better as collateral in DeFi. That's going to be a DIGG that's potentially more useful being part of an index or part of these other futures where there is a real utility for DIGG in multiple places across DeFi. Is that kind of the direction that we're going with the Stability Vault?
Yeah, well,
I think
it can run up as much as it wants, as long as the price is going up day over day, relative to Bitcoin. So it's just another thing to kind of call out, right? Right now, it's the focus is on, all right, where is it above or below peg? How much? Each day around rebase time, see what the the increase in the supply is going to be. It's all pretty exciting. And now it's a whole other thing of all right, is it above it, and is the price increasing from yesterday? And then if not, then okay, Stability Vault's going to do its thing. May or may not have any sort of impact, either directly in the market or psychologically amongst DIGG holders and buyers. But ideally, the more it's stocking away, I guess there's been discussions with the Ohm crew and these partially backed algo assets, and I've shared my opinion that I don't think doing partially backed is kind of is against the point a little bit, in my opinion, for algo assets. But this is some level of partially backed, right? We're holding. There's now going to be big WBTC in something backing DIGG in some capacity, but it's backing it through doing open market actions versus some redemption ability, things like that. So I think that's kind of what we narrative.
Real quick to Wasabi, just to your point, I'm sorry, my phone was going in and out earlier and I was a bit late, so I don't know if this has already been covered. The Ample team, they're kind of I come from econ. They're kind of all pure economists who are doing theory and stuff. I mean, there's nothing. I don't look at the Stability Vault and think it's going to limit market cap. I just think of it as a incremental, smart kind of robo financial kind of bot that makes decisions and kind of just helps prepare for the future. I think that the first step here is, getting the channel set up, then, getting this thing into UAT and with some small amounts, getting some data built up. And I think as we get more data, we can discuss as a community. And if there's more concerns that grow that it might be something that's going to interfere with the mechanics, then let's talk about it. But I think right now my take on it is that it's not necessarily trying to, I mean, look, if we look at KPI options, it's an out of protocol incentive that's trying to align behaviors. They're all kind of trying to align behaviors and incentives together. So I just want to be mindful of time right now. I know we have a few other things to cover and there's not as much time left, but my thought is that we spin up the channel, we get this. I think you have my vote with Jonto, but let's take it to the channel and we, again, I don't want to speak for dev priorities, Tritium, but whatever makes the most sense. I agree that if we could get some testing done and get some data built up while we have the chance, better now than later. But
let's discuss in the channel. So once there's an
Yeah.
RFI channel, like I can talk about what else we're working on, and then we can try to make a decision about what's important. But yeah, I agree. Let's move on.
Cool.
Yeah,
I
okay.
want to share one more narrative thing, just because the way I have kind of described the vault before is like, if we could design our own whale, right? It's like an auto, like when you said auto, like a Autobot or whatever term you used. It's like if you can design what's the best whale activity that would support DIGG but is still focused on being profitable. Like, if there was a whale that had faith in DIGG and was actively trading it to both support it but also try to make money, what would they do? And that's kind of what this vault is intended to be. Like try to provide stability, kind of go with the market, don't fight against the market. In the end, have it ideally be more profitable than just holding DIGG. And that's kind of the goal, and that's a narrative thing I think we can use, and we can actively tweak the strategy to do that.
Didn't we at some point have support from OXB1? Is this something that we could maybe reach out on?
OXB1 solo their dig, but let's move on because we really
Right.
go
Sorry.
topic.
This is the community whale. So,
Apologies.
we're good.
Should we shift gears here? And Wiesek, do you want to give us a rundown on where we stand with options and the minting process?
Yeah, so I think, and this just adds to Tritium's point. It's like, so when we just think about the current rebase right now, there's still other things that the dev team has on their plate just to kind of get options out to the community. And so right now, just to kind of, I'm going to look at this very kind of, it's not all linearly because some of these things are happening in parallel, but just from my perspective, I guess, and for everybody, not like I'm getting back to full steam. I'm probably 70-80%, but still struggling a little bit every now and then. But right now, options should be out later today. At the latest, it would be first thing tomorrow morning. Again, the only reason this is probably taking exactly the same amount of time as last, but there's been a lot of prep work over this weekend trying to ensure that we could mitigate this as much as possible. But at the same time, just for me, it's just been kind of a bit of a struggle. So trying to get that done. I also wanted to speak a little bit about go forward. So, essentially this rebase mining process this is our, third round of it, and we want to continue it. And so there is Gasudo and Omnifarious and myself have begun looking at ways that we can automate the options modeling and create more real-time, transparent modeling processes that could be better for this community, but also I think for our UMA friends who are listening, could be a model of something that others could use as well. So there's been other communities, just so everybody knows, kind of interesting actually. Like I know options have become this kind of like, whoa, like I know Andre or Jörn was talking about options, and like everybody's talking about options like it's kind of a new idea. I was kind of like, man, Badger's been doing this for like 6 months now, 5 months. But I think that there's an opportunity here probably to create a more scalable way of doing KPI options. And so that's what we hope to have maybe for the next round after this. So just so everybody knows, we are trying to improve this process. We understand that waiting 24, 36, 48 hours after a snapshot is not ideal. But given that we are in the money now, my first priority, just so everybody knows, is I want to be right versus fast. And so that's the timeline right now with options. Should be done later today, at the very latest, early tomorrow. At that point, they'll be in dig.finance. And then what we'll do is probably announce it. And then after we announce it, I'll probably try to encourage everybody to look as soon as possible. And if they have any inquiries, get back with me in the first few days. Obviously, if you can't, it's okay. But we just want to try to, get this out as quick as possible, so we can go and get everything to UMA as soon as possible too, so we can start claiming them. So that's the first thing. The other thing too here is in terms of the dev side, which I'm just going to kind of go back to what Tritium said here. This is not my points to talk on, and there's a lot going on. But right now, the initial contract's been created with UMA. It's kind of on DAP and a few others to mint the collateral and move everything over. And then in terms of the actual claiming process and redeeming process, that's something that I know Mitch is working on before. I don't know, Mitch, if you have any updates that you want to bring in, but this is again more dev work. So just trying to always be mindful of what is the most important thing at the moment, considering everything else.
Real quick, my understanding is the front end team's on it. Like I see active PRs and pull requests. So unless Mitch,
that's my take too,
stops me, I think by the time there are options to claim, they will be claimable on the airdrop section of the Badger app. I think we're good there.
Okay, that was my take too. I just didn't want to speak for anyone. So that's kind of the next steps here. Yeah, go ahead, Tritium.
So like I still have this concern that we keep talking about. Like I'm worried that we're not thinking very far into the future, because I don't know. I don't think there's that much dig left in the treasury, right?
Okay, so
I don't know.
Trey, I'm gonna stop you
Okay.
really quick. I'm gonna talk about that in 1 second, but just before we do, just purely operational, just in terms of steps, kind of everything here making sense. But I know where you're going with that, and I actually have a point I want to talk on that too. And then the second one was trying to get some sort of conversation around a second BIP out there. And specifically what I'm talking about is a BIP that would look at the remaining 10% of the TCL funds that have remained unused, and potentially what we should do with them. And where Tritium was going with this and what came up last time is that this is basically the last 10% we have in terms of total supply of DIGG. And I know when we did the TCL, one of the things in the BIP was that if DIGG shoots up above, like I think 15-20% over BTC, then we should pause on the TCL injections, because it would be prohibitively expensive to continue doing so with BTC. When the TCL was done, it was, when you're allocating close to $5 million to something like this, it was done in the most prudent way possible with slow injections, and then DIGG jumped. And so now we have 10% remaining. And I think going back to the community to decide what the right thing to do is the most prudent measure here. And I'll give my opinion just really quickly. I think TCL has been effective in doing what was intended to do. And I think it's a more probably prudent measure to say, let's take the remaining 10%, let's earmark 2% in the event that X% of rewards are exhausted this round for options. So at least we have something for a rainy day, the next rebase event, and then take the remaining 8% or 9%, whatever it is, and move it back to Treasury for potential other ideas or partnerships or things that could come up where we want to have DIGG in the Treasury. But again, I think this warrants discussion, it warrants a proposal, and it warrants a community vote. So I don't know, Tritium, if that's where you're going with that, but I just wanted to jump out and say that, because I think that's another part of this discussion we need to have as soon as these options are finalized and out.
Kind of. I mean, I just think also there needs to be like a long-term plan, right? Because I think DIGG needs to last more than a few more months, right? And then I'm not super up on the emission schedules. I think that was ending at the end of this month too, right? So emissions, to keep the liquidity, the WBTC DIGG liquidity, that needs emissions, which needs some allocation of DIGG, right? Jonto was talking about the stabilization set, which means BDIGG, and somehow that needs DIGG emissions, right? And so there's a lot of different things that count on the Treasury having DIGG to fund them. And it feels a bit to me like the last BIP that went through was very short-sighted, right? It was just thinking about how do we make DIGG go boom? So now DIGG went boom, that's great. But now the Treasury is kind of low on DIGG. And I think that for me, and again, it's not really up to me, but what I would like to see before we allocate any more dig is some real like detailed analysis of like where we're at and like a 6 to 12 month plan, or like how are we thinking about this more in the medium to long term, right? Or like, are we just going to mint more dig when we run out? And that doesn't really seem like the right thing to do. But to me, it's a little bit more of a longer term question.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either, Tritium. I think for me, this is just me. It's not. I've thought about a lot of things with dig, both short term, long term. Most of it is, you kind of attend to the things that are going on in the most immediate near term. But I would love to start thinking more about the 6-9 month plan and talking about things that the community and the channel to think about, like, well, what is the right vision here? I mean, the 12-week emissions plan that Poe initially put out, that we revised last BIP to provide some incentive with APYs, that's going to come to an end. And my hope has always been that maybe options could start. It's a more useful way to emit that could start to take precedent in some way. But we also at the same time don't want to continue to probably fund 1% to 2% in options every single month. So what is that? Like, there's a lot of questions here we need to talk about. And I agree with you, Tritium. I think that would be a good conversation to have, and I'm more than happy to have it with anyone here. And it needs more time than the remaining 11 minutes, but I'm in agreement with you. I mean, would it make sense? I mean, is this a stupid idea, but would it make sense? I mean, I feel like I've been part of the Badger DAO now since February, like working and trying to provide support, whether it's dig or financials or just, commenting on stuff. And I don't know if this is the case or not, but I imagine with all DAOs, they're going to hit a bottleneck point where there needs to be some thought about how to create more like mini DAOs or mini kind of like ways or working quickly so we're agile. Is this just adding more redundancy and layers, or would it make sense to almost create like a dig council or a dig, just some sort of like body that can help start thinking about these things more than just 2-3 months out?
In my mind, and maybe this is just my thinking, I could be totally wrong about this, but like if you look at Ampleforth, right, what saved them to a certain extent was that they created this like fourth token, right? They created a Gov token, which then they could emit for Ample. So we kind of have Badger, but Badger's tied up in a bunch of other stuff. And now as we're burning through most of the rest of the Treasury dig, like we're getting to a point where then that's either Badger, which means that we have to go back to Badger governance and get more allocation of Badger tokens for this stuff, right? Or it's some sort of a new governance token. And so maybe the right thing to do is slowly, like build up a council and start to like make decisions and get to the point where that's happening independently, such that at some point like that, those decisions could be spun off into another Gov token or some sort of, in order to somehow create more alpha, right? Because it does feel like dig needs some alpha, and somehow we need to find it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I just don't want to bring it up. I wasn't sure if how it would be received. But yeah, I mean, I think there probably needs to be, and I think this is a very bullish thing for dig. If dig is growing to the point, both in community and growth and everything else, to where we want to start thinking about more long-term ways to support it and scale. But it could be something like that. It could be maybe it's, dare I say, I don't know, maybe it's almost like looking at dig as if it grows, this is done out of strength, which is instead of out of weakness, which I think is a positive thing. But if dig's growth and community continues to grow to the point where it's demanding so much of the Badger team and so much Badger resources, I mean, we went from dig dojos having 10 people to basically 80 to 100 now. Maybe it makes sense to almost look at dig as kind of an annex type thing, where it's kind of given its own kind of support government structure, and then is always tightly part of, included in, still stays with the Badger vaults and everything with that, but starts to create its own DAO in a way. I don't know. Maybe that's a crazy idea.
I mean, I would love to see it happen, but then, there has to be, so if the community can organize, right, if we can really get to the point where like there's that call where like people are excited for these governance tokens, where we're like building in that direction, like I'd love to see it happen. And I think fundamentally you're right, which is the first step is that the people on this call and that the people who have been super involved with dig over the last little while need to maybe get a little bit more organized, right, and start putting more structure around this stuff. And yeah, and it kind of needs to maybe not be you're doing everything, Wes, or that everything's kind of coming through you. But yeah, like I would love to see DIGG go in that direction. I think that's the coolest part of the DIGG story is that the community just kind of, we had a bunch of community members that stayed in and got beaten down and stayed in and then banded together and brought it back to life, right? And so I think the best future for DIGG is for that to continue and to ride that momentum and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, this actually gets me more excited than anything. I just don't want to be the one making top-down decisions. I would want this to be more than just me, Wasabi, and Omni, and a few of us kind of, so cool. Look, I think there's a lot.
Comments. Let's get some hands up. Let's get some other members of the community up here. I'm really curious what people have to say about Stability Vault, about DIGG future, if it needs its own DAO or future directions. What do you think?
I see Aiken's here. Aiken, do you want to hop up? Or I'm sorry, Tomzo X.
Tomzo X. Atlas did not.
I don't know if there was anyone else before in line. Okay, no worries. So yeah, I just in the line of what Tridium was saying, that I see that you guys, we say Wasabi, I think it's Omni too. You're putting a whole lot of work into DIGG. And obviously, at least on my part, I want to collaborate more, but sometimes I fail to see where exactly I could add my two-way, let's say. So on one side that would be it, and on the other side regarding the governance token, I think it makes a lot of sense because at least from what I could read, reading channels and everything, there are a lot of people that do have the are invested into DIGG, but maybe they don't hold a lot of Badger, so they get excluded, or they don't have much weight on the on the voting, right? And the voting directly affects DIGG. So far, so good. I mean, you've come up with good initiative. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you wanted to say something, Jonto?
No, I'm good. So I'll mute. I was just clicking, I think.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, what I was going to was that so far you've done good proposals, and fortunately they've gone well. But there are a lot of people that are maybe heavily invested into DIGG, but on the overall market cap of Badger, they do not have a lot of voting power, and they could be it could come to a point that we have a conflict of interest there. So I think it would be something we should look forward to, independent, having our own governance token or our own council who watches out for the interest of DIGG holders, right?
I'll also chip in that just want to reinforce that you guys do a lot of the leading, you guys have taken quite a leadership role here, and I think that the community really appreciates that. And so just want to let you know that I think that the community, or at least from my personal perspective, I support you guys' ideas, and the way that you've led this project has been awesome. So I'd be in support of a governance token as well if we could find some real utility for it and make it truly a governance token for us. And also just a quick question, not to derail, but would Badger Punks, or whatever we're calling them now, possibly fit into this as well?
I think that's a great idea to bring in Badger Punks. I mean, when we look at all our faces, we got DIGG in our eyes. So I think that's a definitely good idea to connect the NFTs, because I think that the honeypot a gamification of DIGG really got it to a whole different momentum. And it's just, the market conditions kind of pushed us back down. But I think connecting NFTs and utility and gamification with DIGG is probably a great strategy from my perspective.
Yeah, I would just like to ask, are you thinking, when you're talking about a mini DAO for DIGG, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty similar to when a company goes off and splits off a subsidiary from an extremely successful division that it has. Are you thinking of something similar to that, where it would be a subsidiary of Badger, or that has its own governance token and its own, I guess, small council, but directly reports in some ways to Badger? Or I was just looking for some clarification, or unless it's just an idea right off the bat.
That's a good, honestly, the way you put that is a lot of how I thought about it. I mean, I always define a corporation or a subsidiary where it's almost like an emerging market or emerging business. I think for me, and this is just me speaking, like I think the idea behind a mini DAO or governance token is not to split away from Badger, but to just strengthen the relationship and the correlation of DIGG to governance, and then also just further strengthen the relationship between Badger and DIGG. I think so. Flywheel that is just massively critical. So continuing to have DIGG part of the Badger boost and feed into those vaults, and then continuing to have DIGG in vaults, and then I just think it creates more opportunity and utility and helps create and streamline innovation as well, and align interest through an idea of a token. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is how I've thought about it. But I come from a financial planning team, so that's usually how I think about things.
No, that makes sense. And that actually, I mean, if DIGG is taking a lot of time and resources away from the Badger, I just lost my train of thought, the Badger Council, then a DAO, a mini DAO or a subsidiary would make the most sense, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. I love it.
You could even have some more, like, you know, I know everybody said like they appreciate what Wasabi, Weezik, and Omni and everyone's been doing over the last 4 or 5 months, and that is greatly appreciated, because I think there were times at the very beginning when we're like, this is crazy, or is it not crazy? And we just kind of pushed through because we all believed in it. But I just want to also just mention that like what we've been pushing for and doing, the Badger team has just been so incredibly supportive. I mean, I'm always worried if the dev team hates me or not, because I'm like, hey guys, like things are going really well. We need to do this. And Tritium's kind of always been, and Mitch and Dap and everyone's been super supportive. But this could also allow for more dedicated DIGG resources to help on the dev side too. So that way we're all aligned better, and we're not getting in the way of like Badger growth and innovation on that side.
Awesome. Thank you.
Looks like we're just at an hour here. Anyone have any final comments before we send
So this
you
is
off
an exciting
to
conversation.
Planer
I
Co-op?
mean, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to talk a little bit longer, but I know we're right at time. But this is, I've been thinking about this for a while, but I always kind of thought if it were to come up, it would need to come up organically and be done, because that's the community, because that's the direction the community wants to take it. And so to kind of see this starting to kind of think about what the next steps are here, to me, that maybe the first iteration of this is just trying to, if it makes sense. I don't know if it does or doesn't, so maybe we could talk about this more, but if it makes sense to put together somewhat of a DIGG council that could help at least aggregate some semblance of ideas. And it's not that I don't want to be the one doing it or Wasabi doesn't, but I think, I don't want to speak for them, but I think everybody up here would say that we also don't want to be like providing some sort of top-down decision-making way of doing things, because I personally feel that that's kind of the very thing that DAO was trying to get away from, is a much more flat hierarchy that's doing a bottoms-up and a top-down approach in terms of like thinking about the direction of whatever company or product that we're working on.
I mean, if we've gone over, I'm free to stay. I believe I don't have anything lined up.
I'll take silence as 100% agreement. So awesome. Kidding.
Can y'all not hear me? Or can we? Hello?
No, I hear you. I hear you.
I think Wes is having some.
Yeah, Discord's been having issues lately. Can someone relate to him maybe that I'm free to stay and discuss this, and happy and excited to actually. I don't have anything lined up for the next hour, but I know we have to cut this off officially, right?
Yeah, I got to run here, but feel free. Yeah, I think it'll keep going if I jump off. But I think the immediate next steps, we're going to fire up. Jonta's got the request for feedback comment channel going in the Discord on the Stability Vault stuff, and then we'll continue the discussion on the overall future of DIGG, if it needs a governance token, if it needs a council or separate dev resources, that whole kind of big picture stuff. I think probably the Badger DIGG thread in the main Discord is probably the place for that. And Weezik, you're working on a BIP for the additional TCL and getting the options calc pushed out for minting and redeeming this cycle.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's not additional TCL, it's just kind of what to do with the remaining TCL. And again, it may be that, maybe if the community says they want to keep it and for a rainy day, great. But I just think it's worth discussing, because I do think, as Trinium said, there's probably things we might want to think about in the future versus the now when it comes to that remaining 10%.
Yeah, I'll light up the RFF for the Stability Vault, and then yeah, let's figure out where to have this conversation, whether it's just another channel in the Discord or somewhere else with people that want to spitball on it. I mean, I'll share my 2 cents briefly, and then I got to hop off too. But just seeing how things have evolved with Badger and how we interact with different lines of business and different partners over the past couple months, I think something like this probably does make sense. And as you can see, when the community in this smaller group that started, as you said, with just a couple people in the DIGG dojos and now has grown to like a big groundswell of support. It was the community that kind of revived DIGG. We were doing stuff as we could as a team, but I'm gonna be honest with you, like coming out of getting the DIGG rebase options, the first iteration, if we had to be running it fully internally, I don't think we would be anywhere close to where we are now, just given the extent of other priorities that we have going on and a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do with kind of honing what is like the Badger core competency, core product. And there's not a lot of room when you're building an open source for a project to do a lot of different things. In my opinion, it makes sense to just have really close partnerships. Like we don't want to figure out how to code up options to do rebase options. It's 1,000 times better to just do it with Uma, who's already done the hard work, and they focus on that thing, and we can just feed in inputs and make requests and build out. I think, however it manifests, doing that with DIGG, I think can only be stronger for DIGG and Badger going forward as well. So I think let's figure out where to have that conversation. Happy to weigh in, and excited to see what people kind of come up with. But just put the options out there and get the conversation going.
I've got some ideas I'd like to piggyback on that. John, I know that like some of y'all have to leave, but we can leave the stage going. Yeah.
I don't know who is it. Will, who if you leave, we'll kill it, or is it just open? I don't know how this works.
I think as long as anyone who's on the stage stays here, it can stay open.
Last man standing.
Right. I'm gonna jump off
I
here.
can stay.
If it kills it, I think it'll switch the admin to someone else. So have at it, folks, and I'll see you back next time.
Later.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in here unless you got something, John.
No, go for it. I can do a couple minutes and I got to bounce.
Sure. Well, my thought was just like was just said. Why don't we use stuff that's already in place? Listen, like with the superhumans, we just did something really similar where we airdropped all the superhumans a token that doesn't have any value to anybody else, right? It's an options token. So if we were going to do that with our governance, I would suggest considering maybe doing something like that right now for DIGG holders, similar to, I guess, what we're doing with our options already with UMA. Just like, just if we decided to go with a new token, my concern is that I don't want to make, if we do decide to go the route of a new token, a governance-based token, I don't want it to be like to take the stage from DIGG. I don't want it to be something that that understands what we're trying to do here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think you'd figure out what the answer for it is. Like, is it purely governance, and then what is it governance of, and then what does a project do long term? Is it generalizing the rebase options solution into something that's more repeatable in an actual product, and then allowing other projects to use that too, and then maybe charging a fee or something like that eventually kind of flows back. There's a lot of different things that can be done, but you want to make sure that it's distribution and utility both matter a lot. So you definitely want to be careful with that. But I think it's there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done.
So just bear with me here. My initial thought, and this is just throwing something out there, would be DIGG DAO, where Badger funds it with whatever it is, whatever they're willing to fund it with. Whatever, and then we kind of go from there. And I would want it to be kind of like was mentioned, a governance token would be my thought. I don't, like I said, I think that giving it like a ton of value is going to take away from what we're trying to do with DIGG. So I would hope that it would be used purely for governance at this point. But I also think it's interesting, like if there's a way that we could do the kind of the Badger Punks idea along with it, I think that there's something there. I think we need to put things together.
Yeah, I would say we've gone, this has been a very exciting conversation. We've gone from probably 0 to 100 miles an hour in the last 20 minutes. there's a lot of questions and things we need to think about just from a business side, just thinking about what's the right way, what's the right approach, what's our goal, that we haven't even started yet. So my advice right now would be, let's focus on like just trying to get some semblance of a perspective together on, we have an idea that we think there's I think to me, if I'm looking at the objective of like this discussion, it's basically to try and better align kind of like DIGG interest and DIGG support and DIGG capacity to the token, and kind of as things grow, give that more of a direct correlation to help govern and support. So there's a lot of ways that could happen, and maybe it's a governance token, maybe it's not. Maybe like I want to be very clear. As much as I think I'm very supportive of this, I also think that I'm supportive of it if it's in the right way, the right reasons, and the right approach. So to me, the first approach here, the first step is honestly probably just trying to put together some semblance of maybe a DIGG council that can start trying to put together thoughts to kind of share with the community and kind of start bringing up for discussion and going back to proposals and going back to, again, the Badger DAO and discussing what makes sense and going from there.
Now you bring up some great points, and once again, I don't want to jump ahead. I agree with you that like I said earlier, I feel like we need a utility for it first. I do like the idea of it because I think it would allow some kind of a flexibility for us, but utility would be like the main. You're right. We need to start from the base.
I probably do need to go here in a bit. I think just to kind of summarize everything here, though, again, if anybody hasn't, go to Tom's OX for the POAPs. The cool thing I will say is that there's so many things that this community's done that could be a basis for like governance, like whether it's, you know, POAPs as a basis for like how you maybe potentially could get some governance tokens distributed, or like options or holders. Like, I think the cool thing here is that there's just a ton of raw like material that we have to work with, and the more that the DIGG community grows, the more that DIGG grows, the more that there's like a desire to kind of do these things. I think the more that a lot of these questions will be answered, and that it'll become much more clear in terms of what the next steps are. But in terms of next steps, go to Tom's OX for your POAP. We're opening up the RFF channel for Stability Vault. KPI option should be out soon. Hopefully we'll be able to iterate and improve this in the next round. And I need to get out a proposal that just looks at the remaining TCL funds so we can think what the right next step is. And we'll put that back to a vote. So that's everything on my end. If there's any other questions.
Sounds good.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you guys.